Welcome to Fantasy Baseball on Deck, everybody, and get jazzed because we're here to talk about trade evaluations. Whether you receive a trade blindly, kind of out of the blue, whether you're looking to trade an asset because someone like Fernando Tatis Jr. is coming off of the suspension, or you are just looking to improve your roster overall, we're going to go through 3 different trade evaluations of things that I've received in my inbox, players that I'm seeking out for various reasons, and so on and so forth. I actually already did this video. This is my second time running through all of this because I basically, as you see me now, it's just my face on the screen. I did this entire presentation already, but forgot to hit the share screen button. So that's why it's coming out a little later than I wanted it to. But anyways, we press on. As always, now that I officially hit the share the screen button, okay, ideally you guys can see this. Okay, I am going to talk about what I can and cannot control. What I talk about at Fantasy Baseball, what are on deck, and what I promise to you guys is that you guys will score the most points in your league, but I can't guarantee you'll win your championship because Fantasy Baseball is a goofy thing. Through 2 weeks, in both of my leagues, well, 3 of my leagues, I am 1-1 essentially. It turns out if you draft the same team across all of your the leagues essentially, and take Jeffrey Springs goes down in every single league, you lose him in all 3 of your leagues. All eggs in one basket, you win when you're doing really well across all. And then if you have a poor week, all 3 of your teams lose. So we're starting off 1-1. Now, it's not as fun as last year. If you were with me last season, starting out 8-0 across both of my leagues, obviously that was a fun ride to start out my career here with you all at YouTube. But anywho, what we can control in this league specifically, I consider this a win now team. My points for, I am currently 3rd. I am leading in strikeouts. See, like that's something that we can always manipulate our rosters to make sure that we're leading in, getting those bonus points. And then even my innings pitched, I'm leading in that, something I feel like I can control. What I can't control, what I can't really answer as of right this second is what happened to my bats. I just was not hitting last week at all. Have a lot of faith in my bats, but they will come around as always. But as of right now, my pitching staff is kind of carrying the load. But anywho, overall, 3rd in points for, and I fear no one. So we'll be okay. And then my other league, this is the league where people only only drafted pitchers across the first 4 or 5 rounds. My very first pitcher that I drafted was Carlos Rodon, injured kind of thing. So I for sure am bat heavy per se in this league specifically. But I am, I have also managed to not strike anyone out. I have very little innings pitched, but with this context, I've been playing with Fernando Tatis Jr. On my bench, so just playing with one hand behind my back, guy on the bench who's I can't do anything with. I can't drop until today he comes back. So now I am at a full capacity, though, again, I've scored the 3rd most amount of points. All of my my men are essentially my bats are carrying this roster. And then in this last year, I don't really talk about it all. My brother and I run this one. We're 2-2. Same thing. Like in the first week, everything goes right. Like everything was right across the first other 2 leagues. And I am 1-1 and 2-0. And this league, where you play two teams at once per week. So that's why I'm 2-2. When things go wrong across all leagues kind of thing. So if the bats are absent, they're kind of absent across every one of them, but maybe your portfolio / fantasy baseball team's a little more diversified than mine. But that's not what this video is about. Let's just get into trade negotiations, strategies, and whatsoever. As I mentioned before, I already recorded this video, so I've already gone through this once, but I had to kind of sort of go back in time and figure out the context and the importance of these trades as they come in for that time period. So as of this is for April. This would be for April 13th is when I received this trade. I basically out of the blue received a Jose Miranda and Clayton Kershaw being sent to me for who I have as James Outman and Justin Steele. And what I want to sort of talk about is sort of how to evaluate things when they come out of the blue, and kind of the importance of when you get sent a trade out of the blue, there's always a narrative to sort of investigate and find out on your own to sort of answer the questions of why people are contacting you out of the blue to resolve a trade. So if I go to evaluate these players, let's just first look at this roster. If I look at this roster, I can see across the roster, on this day, unfortunately, Orlando Arcia went down. He has since replaced this player. But if I'm looking across and down the roster, I'm seeing that, okay, he's got too many overall bats in general, with 2 guys coming off of the IL eventually. So Jose Miranda is currently his bench bat that is not in the roster, and it started off extra slow. He's still hitting the 5-hole. He got his transition actually to the 6-hole today against the Red Sox, but for such a highly touted player, being over the 154th overall player, a lot of investment into this guy. You want to see a lot more success to start the year, but I think, again, one of these situations where he's got value coming off of the bench that need to use this utility spot. So Bryce Harper will absolutely have to fill in this utility spot. And then also he's got Michael Harris, who is supposed to come back fairly soon, within the coming days at this point. And he's trying to find space to put these players before he has to drop people. And Jose Miranda, as of right now, would be his main most likely drop because of his production, but he put a lot of investment, giving again 154th overall draft pick into this guy. And then if I look down at his pitching staff, obviously I know this person, he drafted 4 LA Dodgers starting pitchers. So he has Urias, Kershaw, May, and and Tony Gonsolin coming off of the IL. I've mentioned before with the LA Dodgers are going to have their current starting rotation is every one of those players with Noah Syndergaard and Michael Grove currently, but they're going to have a soft 7-man rotation. So I sort of mentioned that the players coming off of the IL at the very end of the year, not as much Walker Buehler. He'll be more of an impact in 2024. But Tony Gonsolin coming off of the IL, Ryan Pepois has also, he was projected to be in the starting roster rotation before they announced him as being hurt on opening day. And then also Bobby Miller is one of their top prospects in baseball, and he is currently he's supposed to be a frontline starter, really solid player, and they're trying to transition him as well into the starting lineup. So if I'm sort of looking at it with those eyes, I'm thinking to myself, okay, Clayton Kershaw obviously is usually pretty productive, from an individual standpoint, but how productive is he? That's pretty much the crown jewel of this trade. He's looking for 2 of my very young players, being James Outman. Look at these red players I still have retained on my roster. Obviously, this trade did not go through. So the players that I retained were James Outman and Justin Steele. So I ended up rejecting this, but let's kind of dive into the why perspective. So if I look at this trade, it's clearly he wants to get rid of Jose Miranda. He doesn't care about Jose Miranda. That's not the valuable piece we need to focus on. So we're going to sort of look past Jose Miranda, understanding that that's just the player that he is going to drop. And then he inevitably ended up dropping him anyways. So Clayton Kershaw is the crown jewel of this trade. So really it's thinking about it as I'm giving up James Outman and Justin Steele for Clayton Kershaw. And what does that mean? So if I look at Clayton Kershaw, I drafted him 147th overall. So there's a lot of investment into that. He only had 126 innings pitched last year. We always want our guys, especially frontline starters like Clayton Kershaw, to be towards the 180 inning, magic number that we always sort of talk about. And if I look at just overall fantasy points from last season, where does Clayton Kershaw come up? And it's Erase Woodruff. We're going to talk about him in a little bit. But Clayton Kershaw was a top 40 pitcher in major leagues across fantasy formats last season. Obviously, greatly benefited from wins and losses because they had one of the best offenses that we'll ever see in baseball. Obviously, they fell short, but they scored a ton of runs per se. So let's look at him as more of an individual player. So I'm going to take away his wins, take away his losses, and that's this Scion column over here. And I want to just focus on him as an individual, just him going out on the mound, take away all wins and losses. How productive was he as an individual? And if we siphon that down, we find that Clayton Kershaw essentially is still just a top 40 pitcher. Take away all those 12 wins, it's a lot of bonus points, depending on how much bonus points you get for 4 wins for your starting pitchers. This can be a lot or a little of significance to you, but in ESPN standard leagues, if you get 5 wins, or 5 points per win, you can think about this is 60 points plus to Clayton Kershaw that he doesn't necessarily earn. He was just out there and they hit enough runs. And on the fact that he got 12 wins across only 126 innings, that's just wild. The talk speaks to how awesome that offense was last season. Keyword, key phrase, last season. So he only went 126 innings. I can see that he was like as productive as Tony Gonsolin was, taking away the wins, and Jeffrey Springs, but and even Charlie Morton and Pablo Lopez. But Charlie Morton and Pablo Lopez were guys that threw, I'd say 60 more innings than Clayton Kershaw did. So how can we compact the overall quality per innings pitched? And that's going over this other column here. So we're going to look at the actual value, take away the wins and losses, but we're going to focus on each player from a quality measure instead of looking at them from an overall volume perspective. It's kind of like comparing, Mike Trout is one of the best hitters in all of baseball every year, but he's going to inevitably miss 40 to 60 games. He's healthy so far this year. I hope he plays all 162, but how can we sort of compare these players that don't have as much of a sample size in quality? So if we look at this number, and then we're going to scroll all the way up and see that Clayton Kershaw was a top 10 overall production guy from an individual perspective, seeing that, per innings pitched, he was similar to Dylan Cease and Carlos Rodon. That's really, really awesome. But heading into his age 35, 36 season with only 126 innings pitched, this is a guy who has not surpassed that 180 number, the magical 180 number since 2019, given that it's now 2023, and he's just never really been right since they just let him loose and going for 240 innings pitched that one year that he almost had 300 strikeouts. It's just not smart to do that with your pitchers regardless. But given Clayton's age, a soft 7-man rotation, they're not going to let him go above that, that 100 pitch threshold. They need him for the playoffs. They've seen this story over and over and over again. It's a player that, again, is super efficient with when he's on the mound, but I just don't anticipate him getting more innings pitched than what I'm giving up in Justin Steele. I have a lot of faith in Justin Steele. I have him in every single league, and you can even see his production so far. Well, it's not good. Before we get to Justin Steele, we can see Clayton Kershaw, obviously super duper productive throughout his career, but so far this season, 25 innings pitched, just one more strikeout than innings pitched, and his current ERA to start the year is, if my computer was faster, I could say that it was a 2.52 ERA, and he's always been an ERA champ. Good, always good on that front with a solid under 0.92 WHIP, so walks and hits per innings pitched. And we always want players on our roster who are 1.2 walks and hits per innings pitched, that WHIP number or less, to really make sure that we're getting quality out of each player. And to keep people off the base pass, keeping people off the base pass, striking people out is the best sort of variables put into the equation of keeping runs off the board. So if I look at Justin Steele, obviously Justin Steele so far this year, looking into his stats, pretty much the same from a production standpoint in regards to innings pitched and strikeouts. So 25 innings pitched so far, only 24 strikeouts this past game against Oakland, another really solid outing. His whip is really, really good, similar 0.88 whip, walks and hits per innings pitched, but also 27, turning 28 mid-season this year. This is really the first year and that he'll be allowed to take off. They projected him as having an innings pitched limit, but given that Chicago's starting off pretty strong, and I'm looking at this rotation of Marcus Stroman, Justin Steele, Javier Assad, who is filling in for some injuries, Drew Smiley, and Hayden Wesneski, who is obviously he just got Hayden Wesneski. They have a lot of invested into, but in their top pitching prospect, they just brought him up this year. He's pretty much surrounded by innings eaters. Drew Smiley is just there to eat some innings. Marcus Stroman is not an ace, so he's just there to eat some innings. And if I go down here, Kyle Hendricks is the definition of guy who just eats innings, given how old and really unproductive he's been over the last couple of years. And 33 is not an old number, but like for Kyle Hendricks, he never gets these strikeouts. Old comes quicker when you're not missing bats kind of thing. And then Jameson Taillon had a good season last year with the Yankees, but he's certainly not a guy who is necessarily more talented and is just generally not more talented than Justin Steele. So I'm looking at just from a talent perspective, Justin Steele is the most talented guy on this roster by far and away. You get 27 years old, going to turn 28 this year, should not have an innings pitch restriction. So I'm thinking to myself, if these two guys have really compared similarly, I got Justin Steele at the very, very end of the draft, pretty low in value. What am I giving up with him? Well, James Outman has lost a little bit of popularity just over the last week. And even though he has dipped to just a 281 average, which is still awesome, he's still hitting a double per at bat. So he's getting 2.01 total bases per hit. And most importantly, he is now hitting the leadoff spot. They just moved him into that leadoff position with the Dodgers. So now he's hitting in front of guys like Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith, and the rest. So he's going to have all of the opportunities to succeed. He's going to get a ton of at bats. He's the best defender for that center field position on that team. We talked about he's 25 years old, obviously very, very good runner. I think he's 83rd or 87th percentile in sprint speed. But like if you look across that roster, like we mentioned before, there's no one in that these position spots that also play outfield that are younger than 30 years old. And we talk about how important it is to have players playing those premier defensive positions to succeed. Center fielder is important. So overall, again, this is the reason why I I absolutely rejected this trade, is because I think that Justin Steele is going to pitch more innings than Clayton Kershaw. Does not have any sort of injury history, knock on wood. And James Outman not even moving to that leadoff spot with the Dodgers and playing every day. I just think that there's a huge, at very least a very high floor on him, given that I had so little invested into him. He's averaging three points per game. Really solid hitter. I think Steele has the edge on Kershaw moving forward to the season. He's just going to be healthier. So this is the reason why I would not accept this trade. And then I'm going on to the next trade. So what is my current situation in this league? I sort of mentioned it before. If I'm going to go to, and I should go to actually my current, well, this was my view. So like I'm looking at my team. I am in the middle last week. I'm in the middle of the week and it looks like I'm going to lose because my bats are absolutely killing it. But as we talked about before, my pitching staff just got hurt, and that's where most of my IL people are. So if I look at like Carlos Rodon, Joe Musgrove, who's about to come off of the IL, so I need to make a spot for him. And then also given the fact that Blake Snell had not scored a point in the year so far, he started off super duper slow. And the fact that Eloy Jimenez is coming off of the IL and Fernando Tatis Jr. is on my bench, I got to clear up some space, grab some quality back. So I know that it's Thursday at this time. I know that Eloy Jimenez is going to come off the IL in 1 day or 2 days. He eventually came off the Friday, so the next day after making this trade, because really looking at my roster, I didn't have anyone in my batting lineup that I was comfortable with dropping. So it's essentially like I'm going to have to drop value if I don't trade these pieces away. Also knowing that present day, so it's currently 420 weed. If I don't get rid of a pitcher for quality back at some point in the near future. Joe Musgrove is going to come off of the IL. Would become probably my best starter from a volume and quality perspective. I'm going to have to drop one of these players that would immediately get probably gobbled up by someone in free agency. So you're always looking to gain value. I don't want to always max out my IL spots in necessity. I always talk about how like you always want people to be filled up in your IL spots, but you don't want them to be like people that you're absolutely relying on kind of thing. It's like draft a healthy roster, but like I can just before I had Trevor Story just sitting there because he's not supposed to be back till July. It's a player that I can obviously drop if need be, but given that I only have 3 IL spots, like with Eloy Jimenez and Carlos Rodon and Joe Musgrove, and then Jeffrey Springs getting added that day, it's like, okay, all of a sudden I'm down a roster spot and I need to find someone. So I'm looking for players, all right, positions, teams. Oh my gosh, I'm looking for teams across my league that are kind of in a situation where I can go and help. So if I'm looking down at this roster, a friend named Sam, I'm looking across his roster and I'm seeing, where are his holes and kind of what is his current situation. And really, like starting out the year, he doesn't really have many holes, but doing the extra effort of just basically researching and asking, hey man, like what is your current situation? What are you interested in? What's going on with you? Let's just go over that out completely again. I reached out to Sam and said, I have interest in Brandon Woodruff. At that point, Brandon Woodruff just got put on to the 15-day IL with a little bit of inflammation in his shoulder. And it was originally reported that he was going to miss the very minimum amount of days, 15 days, just being extra protective of him and be like protecting him from himself kind of thing. So Brandon Woodruff, who is absolutely a top 30 player, this is a player that I didn't have an opportunity to draft because the entire draft just went super duper hitter heavy. How can I get a hold of a pitcher who's going to be healthy in 2 weeks, like take another sacrifice? I'm talking about how my IL is maxed out. But if I looked at my IL at that time, like he's going to be ready in 2 weeks from that point. Joe Musgrove's going to be ready at any point, and then Eloy Jimenez is going to be ready like the day after. So like I'm gaining an IL spot. So like I can fill it. I don't love to do this, like I just said. But if I'm looking at rosters, he's currently, he was at the time 0-1. Like I'm going to look across this roster and say, like, okay, I can't really do much for him in regards of the batting situation. And I don't really want to let go of any of my healthy bats because they're all producing so well. But how can I do something to get maybe a Brandon Woodruff who just hit the IL? No one wants to wait that 15 days. That 15 days seems like a mountain of time. So what can I do to, let's get Brandon Woodruff off of this roster? And if I look at Brandon Woodruff across the season last year, obviously I'm talking about him being a top 30 player. He had multiple stints on the IL. So talking in, he only had 153 innings this past year. He is a guy who can go well over 200. He would be an ace on most rosters that Corbin Burns didn't exist. He was the ace of that roster the year that Corbin Burns came on and was a full-time player. So Brandon Woodruff, again, we talk about kind of his actual value, someone obviously who also benefited from wins. But if I look at Brandon Woodruff, okay, he's a top 30 starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. But again, like he only threw 153 innings. He was a top 30 guy in just 153 innings. If I go to actual value per innings pitched, again, looking at the quality, what is he? He's a top 20 guy. He was as productive as his teammate Corbin Burns, Julio Urias, Garrett Cole, and Aaron Nola, the top guys getting drafted within even the top 10 per innings pitched. He just has to stay healthy. So I see myself, this is an opportunity to really make a significant improvement to my roster. And let's see if I can give away one of my bats, because I talked about like all of my bats at every single position. I wouldn't have felt comfortable dropping any of these players because they're either all have a super high ceiling and they're not underperforming, or they have a super high ceiling and they're performing well. So how can I get one of these players back who are currently just projected? Like, again, he had inflammation after one of his starts and they just put him on the IL to be super careful with him. Since then, the the diagnosis hasn't been super good. So he's going to miss more time than just the 15 days. But at the time, it's like, okay, I have an opportunity to grab a top 20 starting pitcher, which is something that I need. How can I get it from this team? Who just had to slot him to the IL and is currently 0-1. So reaching out and obviously getting to the point where it's just like the trade was going to be just Eloy Jimenez, Brandon Woodruff, and Bryce Elder. So these are the players that we want to focus on. At that time, you think about what is the only hole that maybe he has, and I'm going to maybe look for outfield. And Andrew Benintendi, and then like Gunnar Henderson is someone you couldn't really drop, being such a high prospect. But like the only hole really in his roster is going to be that one Andrew Benintendi outfield spot. Okay, so and I have an extra outfielder being Eloy Jimenez, who's going to come off of the IL, and I'm not going to have anywhere to put him, kind of thing. So how can I utilize maybe Eloy Jimenez, who's like, someone I put a lot of investment into? He was a top 100 pick, 96th overall pick. He was a number 2 overall prospect in baseball a couple years ago, with only Luis Robert and like Fernando Tatis Jr. Alongside him, and Vladimir Guerrero Jr., like super high guys. He is a 204. He's one of the only players in baseball that a part of a very short list of players in baseball that can actually hit 40 home runs a season if he can just stay healthy. So one of those aspects of like, this guy is super quality. Obviously starting off slow, but like anyone starting off the season, going on the IL in the very beginning of the year and then coming back, especially as a bat, it just takes time to get back up to speed, kind of thing. And he's going to play every single day because the White Sox are really a win now team. They're super young, but like they have the pitching staff to succeed. They have the bats to succeed. They just kind of have to put it together all at once, because most of the time, a lot of their players are all hurt at the same time, kind of thing. So if I'm looking at this trade per se, it eventually gets down to a point where you have to really know your stuff. Like Kyle Wright's just coming off of the IL with Bryce Elder. So Bryce Elder just gained, man, I really hope the video doesn't annoy everybody, because I already did this once and I was really organized, and now I'm like going back and rehashing it. It's never good the second time. So Bryce Elder being super productive to start the year, has got a ton of run support. It's just a player who has never not succeeded being in the MLB. I couldn't believe that he didn't win a roster spot to start the year. He had Dylan Dodd and Jared Schuster in front of him to start the year. They both got shelled, sent down. But with Max Fried originally going to the IL and him coming back, and then also Kyle Wright going to the IL and just now coming back, Bryce Elder had an opportunity to make a start and really should have a stronghold in that Atlanta lineup as the number 5 guy in that rotation. And they score so many runs, and he has such a track record that in the win now, kind of with the win now situation in mind, it was easy for Sam to sort of invest, say, I can send Brandon away because I can see the potential with Bryce Elder, and also the proven potential of Eloy Jimenez being a 275 batter at 6'4", 240, who has averaged 27, been on a 27 to 30 home run pace every year that he's been in the league. He just can't see on the field. So really, it's a lot of quality back for a future investment. And this whole team really is future investment. So I'm looking at like guys who are going to help me in the future. Obviously just lost Jeffrey Springs for the season, which really sucks because he was doing great. Number 1 pitcher in baseball when he was healthy. But like Carlos Rodon and Joe Musgrove being my best pitchers, not being able to really access them until week 3, week 4, week 5, depending with Carlos Rodon, especially. Like, this is just, I've leaned into the fact that my pitching's not going to be super good. My bats are going to carry this roster. And as long as I can make the playoffs with finally a healthy pitching staff going into it, imagine adding Carlos Rodon and Joe Musgrove into this, and then Brandon Woodruff, and that really would make all the difference. So that was my effort here. Obviously, this was accepted. And then at the very end, asking the question of, hey, if I'm going to send you 2 players for 1 player back, that means the team that I'm always talking about, sending volume for quality back, marginal improvements. What player are you going to drop? And he told me that Michael Kopech was going to end up being his player that he dropped. I have a lot of have a lot of faith in Michael Kopech. I think he's going to be a good player. Last season, he was very good until he had an injury and never really came back the same. I don't hold like his opening start against him versus San Francisco, given that like it's just cold on April 3rd in Chicago. It's cold, it seems like forever in Chicago until you probably mid-May. So not going to hold these first couple starts against him. I like to see that the strikeouts improve a little bit, but overall it just seems like a pretty like middle of the line pitcher that I can rely upon. So knowing that was the guy that was going to be dropped, that's who I ended up picking up. And then knowing that also I was going to have to slot Jeffrey Springs into my IL, that obviously frees up a spot, knowing that like I don't have anywhere to put him. But if I can trade away assets to get one asset back, that gives me an opportunity to go after another starting pitcher. So I'm sending away essentially two guys who are going to be on my active roster for an IL spot. So they're freed up an opportunity to get Taj Bradley. Taj Bradley, obviously starting off super hot, not playing super awesome offenses, at least with the Reds in his second start in Boston with his first start. But the fact that he has 17 strikeouts across only 10 innings pitched is pretty awesome with a 2.61 ERA. But you guys can read that, obviously as fast as I can kind of thing. So that's my effort there, is especially when like people come off of the in the free agency pool, they're getting brought up, prospects are getting brought up that have a super high ceiling. Taj Bradley being a top 20 prospect in all of Major League Baseball at that starting pitching position with the Rays. We know what to expect out of that position. They have pitchers figured out. I didn't have a spot to add him to my roster. So what can I do? Trade away assets for one quality back to add the underlying really good guy from free agency, but you have to do it really quick or else these players disappear. You got to be ahead of the ball game, always be anticipating moves really before the major public catches on. And then my third overall, and with Taj Bradley too, with Springs and Zach Eflin, on the IL, he is going to have every opportunity to pitch every 5 days moving forward. So if he's somehow still available in your league, that's a player I'd go after. And then next is I'm going to talk about the situation where I just received another trade, and with this particular individual, and he's probably watching, he understands that I have a affiliation and a love for Taylor Ward. I think Taylor Ward's really special. I have him in most leagues. I had him in every league last year. He's kind of my claim to fame, one of my claim to fame guys, him and Spencer Strider. And Taylor started off super duper hot and has cooled off, but he's playing every single day, leading off for the LA Angels. So really what he's trying to do here is like, I know here's a carrot, Austin, here's Taylor Ward. And then here are my two other players. Here are two other players that I would rather not drop, but are kind of underperforming, and I don't really know what to do with them. So let's look and kind of find the narrative. If you receive a trade out of nowhere, what is the narrative? And if I look across his roster present day, so it's currently April 20th. If I'm looking across his roster, he has filled up his IL spots. So Tony Gonsolin, Stanton, and Harper are not people that you can drop. So Michael Harris should be back soon, but is not yet soon. So he's currently playing with one hand behind his back, and he has a bench spot that's currently being filled. Doesn't have anyone to put there. He just had Rojas yesterday in a second base position, who actually just hit the IL. So he just picked up Taylor Walls to replace. Obviously, Taylor Walls has had a pretty good year to start the year. Hopefully he gets an opportunity to play every day. He's a flexible guy, but really, if you're looking at like putting together the narrative of this team, it's Anthony Rendon. If we just look at like the active players going for him in third base, if I look at Patrick Wisdom, Anthony Rendon, Anthony Rizzo, who's first base, third base eligible, and Nolan Arenado, the player that is obviously the trade-worthy guy is going to be Anthony Rendon. Just came back from suspension, is always injured, and just by chance within the last couple of weeks he's been hitting hot. He's currently hitting a 389. I say last couple of weeks, he's literally been playing for just over a week in general. So if I'm seeing that he's for the season 286. That's a big name, Anthony Rendon, hitting 389, no home runs so far this year, only 35 at bats, small sample size, but it's a big name and a player that he drafted 192nd overall and then dropped and then picked up, or no, he just picked up from free agency, so he didn't draft this player, but it's a player that holds value, or at least holds a namesake. So that's kind of like a tag, but he really doesn't want to play Anthony Rendon. The thing is he's going after Justin Steele again. He's showing a lot of promise. One of my better starting pitchers to start the year. And then Nolan Gorman, holy crap, that Cardinals roster. I feel bad for anyone who has a Cardinals player that's not named Paul Goldschmidt or Nolan Arenado, because they're all performing at such a high level, but there's just not enough positions on the field to hold everybody. So Nolan Gorman being a guy who is still averaging over a double per hit. His batting average is still more than serviceable at 316 on the entire season. He's only hitting the 6th spot. But what's positive, at least, about Nolan Gorman and kind of how I evaluate this is maybe this is the Cardinals. Nope, that's not the Cardinals. Here are the Cardinals. If I look at Nolan Gorman, he's specifically all season long, he's only been getting that DH spot. And I look at him now and just over the last couple of days, second base, DH'd on Sunday, second base before then. So at this point in the season, he's moved up in the batting order. So now he's moved to the 5 hole. And he's actually getting spots. He's getting opportunities to hit at that second base position. This is a first round pick, 19th overall in 2018. He's only 22 years old. He's about to turn 23. He is a home run machine, absolutely explosive player. They have to keep this guy in the lineup. If I'm looking at that, I'm saying, man, like I was trying to possibly get rid of Nolan Gorman earlier this year. Because he's just losing at bats, but just given how productive he's been, he's making it almost impossible for him to be able to be dropped, sort of thing. So if I'm looking at this again, Dustin May, coming off of Tommy John surgery, being a super young kid, he's going to be limited in his innings. Dustin May also has not surpassed 87 pitches per game, so like he's not a guy who's going to get a ton of opportunities to even earn wins. And obviously he's not a player that's been super efficient this year. So if I look at like Dustin May over the entire season, 24 innings pitched with only 13 strikeouts. That's a very bad ratio. It's not a good ratio in regards to fantasy. And then seeing that he's allowed an ERA of 3, which ERA of 3 would be awesome. But again, he's limited in his pitch count, and he's not getting those bonus points from strikeouts. So it's just a player that, again, has a big name, has a big team organization behind him, but overall, as an individual, not a super productive player. So I don't trust Anthony Rendon, even though he's hitting the 5 hole. He's not hitting for any power so far this year. And Taylor Ward, I have a lot of faith in, but I wouldn't want to give up one of my best pitchers so far this season. And honestly, per at bat, my most productive bat for essentially what would be Taylor Ward and Dustin May, who's trying to get rid of because of that Dodger soft 7-man rotation. So that is the end of the third trade. So building the narrative, I already did that. We're going to go on to our final thing, which is essentially answering the questions that I didn't get to in my last video. So if I can find the correct tab, I'm sure this looks great on your guys' end. Here we go. Okay, so friend from down under, Shane, from all the way from Australia, asked what my thoughts were about Mauricio Dubon. And my question to you is, how deep is your roster? Is this a guy that you're sort of needing to fill? Because if it's a player that you just need to be on your roster and in your roster, you need somebody flexible. How hurt are you right now? Then like Dubon is a guy that can fill, but Dubon is absolutely not going to be the long haul answer here, especially in that leadoff position with Houston. The only reason that Jeremy Pena lost that leadoff position with Houston is because he's hitting, I think, 211 to start the year. But if we talk about how productive Jeremy Pena has been, since he's with his hits that he's managed to get, 211 on the season, not super awesome, but when he does get a hit, he's getting 1.94 total bases per hit, so just under a double, way more productive player, and he's stolen 5 bases. And again, Dubon plays across 3 positions, so that's valuable, but he's a singles machine. He is a very, very dependent player across, let's say he's hitting a crazy number right now. He's got 20 hits on the entire season, and only 3 of them so far have been extra base hits, and they've all been doubles. So he's hitting 323. He does not walk, so his on base percentage is only 338, given a 323 average. So he's not getting a ton of help from walks either. But they just really need somebody on base in front of their monster bats that are coming up behind him. So I really look at him as just being a plug and play, like for now sort of thing, especially with Chas McCormick going to the IL, and he's coming back any day now. I think he's projected to be back on Friday, meaning that's tomorrow or Saturday, I think the 22nd or something like that. So Dubon immediately is going to lose his value the second that he drops in the lineup. Super dependent player. He's not stealing bases. He's not getting extra base hits. He's just getting on base with singles. So this is a player I could very easily avoid. So that is me answering Shane, my dear friend from Australia. And I was going to show that I don't need to show the Houston lineup anymore because I already said before that he's leading off. He's been leading off for the last 5 days, and he does have a 10-game hitting streak being Dubon. But, this is because Chas McCormick has been hurt and out. So going on to the next question, which was from Steve Krautz, and Steve asked about, like my last video talked about all of the best free agent hitters and pitchers available, and most of them, at least in his league, were already taken. He's in a super deep league, so he asked me to specifically go over prospects, super under the radar, low owned guys that can make a difference. And Zach Neto, actually the last 2 days before today, was hitting leadoff position, but one of the days Trout was sitting, and one of the days Ward was sitting. So Zach Neto, even being a right-handed hitter and going against right-handed pitching 2 days in a row, had an opportunity to start both of those days. He's the most qualified shortstop defensive guy on that roster. Now I think they've mostly been playing Luis Rengifo, Louis, man, that's embarrassing. Anywho, let's just move on and say that Luis only really fills in at second base and corner outfield slots. So far since Neto has made his debut, he's played every day in the shortstop position, and it's really not a super young, quick roster. They need players that are going to play that position on defense well. He's going to be there. He's projected to be a really, really solid hitter. He was a solid hitter so far this year in AAA. He already had like 4 or 5 home runs in AAA. So though he's 2022, he's only 22 years old, and he doesn't have any weight to him, a very skinny player. He has enough power to respect and to maybe fill into your roster if you're looking for somebody who is super duper down in the weeds. More exciting, Jake Berger, since Yohan Moncada has been on the IL, Jake Berger's had an opportunity to pretty much play every day with the White Sox, and he's hitting 277, and he is currently averaging over a triple per hit. So he's got 25 total bases through only, let's say the math is through only 8 hits on the entire season. So is that sustainable? No, but given how productive he's been, that 276 average is awesome regardless of who you're looking at. But the fact that the amount of power that's coming from that, he just hasn't had an opportunity to really find himself on the field. Him and Gavin Sheets are both really good hitters with the White Sox. They just defensively, the bats are there. The bats have always been there, but they just have never been able to figure it out defensively. So if Jake Berger can absolutely, if he can actually lock down an opportunity to play every day at third base and even in the corner outfield, this is a player that's absolutely should be on your radar. And the fact that he's averaging over a triple per hit, it's pretty solid. Next player is Kerry Carpenter, being a 25-year-old kid with the Detroit Tigers. He's currently the 4-hole in that Tigers lineup, who does not score a ton of runs, but the fact that he's playing every day, this is a guy who's hitting over a double per hit, so 2.08 total bases per hit. And again, as I mentioned before, he is the 4-hole hitter, and he has been actually slotting in and outfield as well. So he's been back and forth between DH and right field. They're trying to get his feet wet, keep him defensively fresh, and he seems to be in the lineup every day. So it's a player that keeps on producing. That is another guy that is going to play just about every day. And going to round out my bats for you, Steve, if you have a outfield like only slot, like I have in one of my keeper leagues, there's like a minor league slot for only minor leaguers. Jackson Chourio obviously is going to be between the number 1 and 3 overall prospect in all of baseball next season. So if you're having one of those keeper leagues and you have a minor league spot, then Jackson Chourio is a pretty knock on wood, easy selection, but like he probably isn't available in that league anyway. So too, just message me on this video and tell me whether or not that was helpful. I don't know if you have a minor league slot, but if you're looking for guys that are coming out of the minor leagues just fresh now, let's, the guys I've already talked about being Nito, Berger, and Carpenter, and then the rest are relevant. So going on to the starting pitchers, and this is where things get exciting. Mason Miller just came up with the Oakland Athletics yesterday and made his first start. Obviously, like 4.1 innings pitched, like 2 earned runs, 5 strikeouts across his first game. Is just okay, but he was certainly limited on his pitches. He's going to work up to be that frontline starter. Like his AAA numbers are wild. So he is their top prospect as a starting pitcher. He averaged yesterday his fastball 99.3 miles per hour, and he topped out at 102.5 overall. His AAA stats, though of a very small sample size, 8.2 innings pitched so far this year with a 19-0 strikeout to walk ratio. This essentially puts him at a K per 9 that's 21.4 strikeouts per 9 innings. Is that something that's sustainable? No, but just the fact that like these guys that are coming up, Mason Millers of the world, are the players that really make a difference early on in your league. They're going to be restricted, but like those guys that are extra efficient with their pitches when they're out there really can still make a difference. If to anyone who had a Spencer Strider last year, even though he was only allowed to throw 80 pitches per game, Jeffrey Springs, Drew Matt Rasmussen, those guys that really were never allowed to even get towards that 100 pitch count per game, as long as they're really efficient, they're striking people out, they're going to make a difference on your team. So Mason's never going to get any sort of run support. Oakland's they're really struggling from an offensive perspective, but if he even conjures anything close to a 10, 11, K per 9 ratio, if he is striking out people at a solid rate while keeping those earned runs down, it doesn't matter if he's getting runs or not. That's a player you need to go after. And sacrificial lamb, finally they got rid of him. Mason Bumgarner, obviously don't love to see players fall off the mountaintop as quickly and as abruptly as Madison Bumgarner did, but given that the Arizona Diamondbacks have now finally cleaned out one of those starting pitching rotation spots, that opens up an opportunity for where am I at? It really opens up an opportunity for both Dre Jameson and Ryan Nelson to fill in immediately full time for the rest of the season as starting pitchers in that roster. They currently have a fill-in here. What poopy Zach Davies is eventually going to come back, and with the strain oblique, it's not a player that I would trust anyways. But like the overall concept here is that these 3 players being 4.8% own Ryan Nelson and 10.8% own Dre Jameson, who's actually been coming out of the bullpen this year, all have super low ERAs. The strikeouts have never really been there with the 2 of them, but they're both so young that like I just like to think with volume and repetition they'll have an opportunity to figure it out. And then Brandon Pfaadt. If Brandon Pfaadt has an opportunity to come up to the major league, if he has an opportunity to come up to the major leagues with this roster, they are talking about how Pfaadt was, his opportunity is maybe going to be in the starting rotation eventually slide into the Arizona starting rotation. This is the biggest fish here. So if we look at Brandon Pfaadt, he was the he was the 2022 pitcher of the year in the minors this past season. He's the number 25 prospect overall in all of Major League Baseball, and he has a K per 9 that is elite. So Brandon Pfaadt, this is a player to add to your watch list for sure. Actually, don't hit this button because that alerts everyone in your league. All of a sudden, I don't know why ESPN did this, but like if you hit this watch button, it shows everyone in the league like, oh, you're looking at this player. Maybe I'll look into this player too. So just know, like, as they're finding people to fill in, if Brandon Pfaadt ends up making his way onto the starting rotation, this is a player that absolutely is like the next, I hate to say like the next Spencer Strider, but again, he was the 2022 minor league pitcher of the year. Look up his minor league stats. They are wild. So that is the end of Steve's question. Now I'm getting to just talk to Frazio for just a second about Jordan Walker's situation. So like Jordan Walker, I mentioned that he broke the record for hits strung together to start a career. That is true. That is awesome. But also he is now competing with way too many people in this lineup I talked about before, that the outfield is way too crowded. Since Lars Nootbaar came back from the IL to start the very beginning of the year, he's played almost every single day across these spots. And then since Lars Nootbaar actually came back is the only time that Jordan Walker's had any sort of a rest day. So, pay attention to the utilization of Jordan Walker. Hopefully he does not start getting benched, but if he does, then it's a player that we unfortunately sort of have to start thinking about trading before he loses any sort of value. And then with Tampa Bay and Josh Lowe so far, he was the top 10 prospect with the Rays in 2020 with the Rays. And, he was the first round 13th overall pick in 2016, and it's out of high school. So looking at his overall and these gosh darn ads, looking at his overall opportunity at production, being a very, very young 25-year-old kid who came up last season, he's kind of playing sparingly off and on every day. But, if you're looking from a power perspective, like this roster doesn't have a ton of it besides Isaac Paredes, Franco, and Rosarena and Lowe. Like, Lowe has Brandon Lau and Joshua Lowe are different. They're not brothers. Nathaniel Lowe is Josh Lowe's brother with the Texas Rangers, but that's not important. Anyways, to Frasil, keep an eye on Lowe. He's obviously producing a lot when he's on roster. We'll just hope that he keeps getting more and more regular at bats as the season goes on. And then some guy named Evil Zilla messaged me as well. I didn't have time to type it out, and just basically talked about how ESPN is pretty slow to conform to the new information. And I would just like to say that is 100% correct, and that I actually go to CBS for all of my information. So if you go to CBS, I pay $100 for my league, but like their information is so much faster and up to date than anything ESPN. And that's kind of like another reason why I'm able to really manipulate and make the most of playing fantasy baseball on ESPN, because they're so slow to get up to speed on everything happening in baseball, which there's a billion players all going different directions all at once. So it's a lot to keep track of, but CBS actually is the best place to find all of your information for this stuff. So that's the end of my video. I tried to make it quick and it still ended up almost being an hour, but anyhow, hope that it was valuable. Let me know how I did. Please comment, like, subscribe. This helps me grow the page, put a lot of effort into it. I know that I talk a lot, but I try to make the most valuable experience for you guys. So let me know where I went right, and let me know if I did anything wrong. But anywho, have a good day. Bye.